Leanntainn oedd y chladich y mach van y chalag ŵr, ha Port Steòrnabhaigh y cwrtaich di cloch a hadol e glarach archaeolach, edd rwyfig chwicach the Shinkanner Sober Island.
In Gaelic, it's called Air de Clerich, or at least on the later OS maps. So the point of the minister. So presumably that would have been after the disruption and when there was open air sermons. And it would certainly be a good place for that because you could have a lot of people here and a minister there speaking to them all. So the sober could have been from that, maybe. One idea the Stornoway Historical Society had was there's a Gaelic word còmhla, which means something like wind-driven spray. And it's possibly a corruption of that into sober, còmhla, sober sort of thing. Because apparently Goat Island never had any goats on it, and the goat came from goo, from wind. So you can imagine the corruption of Gaelic words. Maybe that's the reason why it's called sober. People think it's because of the teenage drinking, but we're fairly sure that isn't it, because there's an old chap called Harris that walks by every morning. He's 90 years old, and he remembers it being called Sober Island when he was a lad. Another one was that there was a quarantine place for sailors. There was lots of smallpox, lots of diseases like that. Then most ports apparently had a quarantine area where sailors would have to stay before they could go to the pub, I suppose. So that may be where the sober came from. Hey, Thig. Well, there was a boatyard here in the 19th century. So there was a lot of boats got fixed, but then obviously they ended up being a graveyard for boats as well. So we've had Angus Smith, the boat builder, down, and he's told us quite a lot about various bits of oak. They're all oak timbers that we have here. And I think, well, Angus reckons we've got at least one Zulu fishing boat, which were boats that were around during the period of the Zulu Wars, so like the late 19th century. But they were big boats. They're maybe up to like 80 foot long. And so we have various remains of these in the beach here. There's a lot. There's probably a lot more further down as well. They did travel long distances because we know that they were basically in touch from Ireland and Stonehenge up to Orkney, and this would have been the sea road between those two places, and this is a perfect harbour on that route. So like a service station. First of all, you take off the turf and the topsoil, and then you clean it with a trowel. So when I say clean, I mean take all the soil from away between each rock, so you can see what's happening, basically. And then once you've got it clean and you can see it all, you have to decide what's the latest deposit, and you take that away and see what's underneath. And the whole process of archaeology is basically just trying to take off the latest thing and see what's underneath. Digs like this don't often happen because usually what happens is a university comes from down south, comes to the islands, does a dig, and then goes away again, and doesn't really involve many people from the community. So the Trust wanted to have an archaeology project which properly involved the community. At first we thought it might be a kelp kiln, which are about this size. But as we took the turf away and the topsoil and we started digging down, we haven't got any burning, no charcoal, nothing like that, no heat crack rocks. So it does actually look like it might be a little building. And then, yeah, just in the slot that we're excavating, we got a whole pot crushed. Here you can see. So all of these bits were all together, and it was like the pot had been crushed in situ. So an expert will be able to tell us exactly how old that is. I think it's Iron Age, but it might be medieval. But an expert's going to tell us exactly how old that is, and that'll give us a date for the structure. The logic was actually that, just across there was the original MacLeod's Castle. And we thought that if you were defending Stornoway, and you had a castle there, just that side of this small strait, it'd kind of be inconceivable that you didn't have anything here because you're leaving yourself wide open. So, of all the people, you know, there's been plenty of ages when people have fought over Stornoway, the Norse and the medieval clans and Cromwell. So we thought, oh, there's bound to be something here. Plus, it's really handy for everyone in the town to get to, because the whole idea was as a community engagement exercise and to get volunteers digging. So we thought it was a handy place and there should be stuff here. Plus, there wasn't anything known from here. So, you know, if you know that there's something in a place, it's more difficult to dig it, you know, if it's important. So there was nothing important here. So we could have free rein, as it were. So, yeah, that was the logic. We thought there was going to be medieval fortifications, basically, which we have found none of. So far, most of the time, we just got gravel, like beachy gravel, full of some modern stuff, but we also got like 18th century tobacco pipes, nice things, nice, beautiful pipes, and even a little glass bead. But just at the end of the dig, typically, this has come up, which seems to be a really substantial circular wall. You know, that's really interesting because it's probably Iron Age, it's probably prehistoric, because when you get into the historic period, everything becomes square, you know, and angular, but a circular building is probably very old. Most of what we find is Stone Age tools, and that's flint and quartz. So the flakes of flint. Now, it doesn't look much, it probably doesn't look much, but the thing is, we don't get flint in the Hebrides. So basically, to find all this flint concentrated in this little area is very special. It means a lot of activity happened here in the Neolithic. Fast forward to the nicest thing we found, which is an arrowhead. Now, this is a leaf-shaped arrowhead, and it's probably from the early Neolithic, so from like 4,000 BC till around 3,500 BC. But it's just so well made. I mean, can you see how thin that is? It's just exquisitely made. The craftsmanship's amazing. And, you know, soon after the Neolithic, once we got bronze and metal, all the skills to make something like that just disappeared, you know. I guess it gives you that perspective, doesn't it, you know, that 5,500 years ago, people sat here making stone arrowheads and hunting, and there was none. Stornoway wasn't there. So it gives you that perspective of that. That's how old Stornoway is. You know, those people started Stornoway, I suppose, and that was probably because it was such a good harbour